Hey folks, in this video we're going to be learning how to apply conditional formatting with multiple values using Google Apps Script within a Google Sheets workbook. The structure of this video is as follows. First, we're going to see a demo of what this tutorial will provide you. Next, we will do a brief overview of our code base, and then we're going to finally wrap up with a full tutorial that will show you how to recreate what this demo achieves. The scenario that we're working with is a Google Sheets workbook with two tabs. The first tab is for data entry. In this case, we have exercises and people associated with amounts. So we're going to isolate a single individual. In this case, we're going to focus on Matt and his progress against push-ups. So you can see here on line 2, we have one instance of Matt recording his push-ups. Line 10 and 11 also have the same values. So you'll notice that lines 2 and 11 are formatted with color and style elements to the text, while line 10 is not. That's where the second tab called conditions comes into play. We have a set of data in here where we have names associated with exercises and amounts. These amounts are effectively goals. And when we look at push-ups for Matt, you can see the amount is 25. And that's why lines 2 and 11 are formatted the way that they are, and line 10 is not. The cool thing about this script, which we'll be writing in app script, is that it is automated. So it will respond in real time to data entry on the conditions tab. Additionally, it can expand and contract as new columns are added and removed. So the first thing I want to show you is the dynamic nature with which the data tab responds to the conditions tab. So right now, Matt's goal is 25 push-ups. And he most recently hit 50 push-ups, so he wants to make the goal a little bit more challenging. So instead of 25, we're going to set it to 35. And when we go back to our sheet, you'll notice that line 2 automatically removes the conditional formatting now that the goal exceeds the amount entered onto the data tab. Now, additionally, you may have this sheet set up and it begins to evolve, and you want to add new values in here. So let's say that we want to start tracking people's emails. So we don't even have to enter in any data. Just by adding in that column, you can see that the conditional formatting moves over a column. Additionally, we could enter a column to the left, and you'll see the formatting will stick with it. So we could say address, and then same thing over here. We can add in phone number, and that formatting will expand over as the script automatically responds to the stimuli. So the structure of this project will be 3 code files. The first will be our code.js file, which is where we will compile our logic. The second file will be a custom function called getSheetById. And the third file will be a place where we store our sheet IDs. So we're going to be using the getSheetById method in order to extract data from the data sheet as well as the condition sheet. We'll be clearing the formatting of our data sheet, and then we are going to be using for loops and if statements in order to evaluate the data entry against the conditions. And when the conditions are met, we will apply our conditional formatting to the data sheet. Finally, we'll be using an onEdit trigger in order to automate the application of our methods and functions. Cool. So with that out of the way, let's begin our tutorial. So this is a copy of the workbook that we were just working in. We are going to navigate to the extensions menu, and then we are going to open up AppScript. We will begin by naming our project file, conditional formatting. And then we are going to add a script file, and we are going to call it func, which is short for function, space 01 colon space get capital S sheet capital B by capital ID. The name of the file doesn't matter, but I encourage you to be robust in your naming conventions, which will help as your projects expand. This will aid in error management, bug detection, and bug correction. We're going to begin by removing the boilerplate code. You can keep it if you want to. I kind of like to remove it so that I can get into the flow of typing. So we're going to use type out function space get capital S sheet capital B by capital ID. And then we're going to open up parentheses, and we are going to pass one argument into this function, which will be the sheet ID. So we're going to type in sheet underscore ID. This is just a placeholder for a value that will be input and processed within this function. We're going to hit the right arrow on your keyboard and hit space. We're going to use a curly bracket, and we're going to hit enter once, enter twice, add 2 slashes for a comment, and hit space. A word on comments. Highly recommend them. I am going to be using verbose language in my comments. You don't have to type out all the things that I'm saying. At bare minimum, I would recommend adding the slashes, and at bare minimum, just write the word comment or comment goes here. As you advance on your programming journey, leaving little breadcrumbs that give you an indication of what you were doing and why you were doing it will help you as you need to modify things or correct bugs. There are plenty of projects that I have floating out there that have really poor commenting on it, which makes it much more difficult for me to go back and figure out what I was doing and correct anything that might break. So this first comment is going to say access the workbook. We're going to hit enter and we're going to hit tab. We're going to declare a variable called WB, which is short for workbook. We're going to hit space. We're going to hit equal sign. We're going to hit space. We're going to type capital S, and then we're going to use spreadsheet, capital A, app, dot, get active, capital S, spreadsheet. Open parentheses, hit the right arrow on your keyboard, use a semicolon. Now, a note on this method, spreadsheet app.getActiveSpreadsheet only works when you are using a bound app script, which is what we are using here. So if you went to the extensions menu of a spreadsheet and you created an app script from the extensions menu, this method will work. If you go to Google Drive and you open up an app script file that is not from a spreadsheet, you cannot use getActiveSpreadsheet to reference your spreadsheet. You will need to use the ID of the spreadsheet or the URL of the spreadsheet. I'm not going to go into that in this video here, but I just wanted to note it in case you are using an alternative method to try and set up this system. We're going to resume by hitting enter once, enter twice, left arrow once, left arrow twice, add 2 slashes for another comment, hit space. We're going to access all the sheets in the workbook. We're going to hit enter, we're going to hit tab, and we're going to declare a variable called sheets. We're going to hit space, we're going to hit the equal sign, we're going to hit space. We're going to reference the WB variable from line 4. We're going to use dot get capital S, sheets, open parentheses, right arrow, semicolon. What we've done now is collected all the sheets to a variable called sheets, and the result is an iterable, excuse me. So in order to access the sheets, we need to loop through them. And we're going to do so by using a for loop. So we're going to hit enter once, enter twice, left arrow once, left arrow twice, and then we're going to have 2 slashes and a space for another comment where we declare that we will loop through the sheets variable. We're going to hit enter and we're going to hit tab. We're going to type for, which will allow us to use a for loop. We're going to open up parentheses and we are going to use the letter I to represent the variable in our iteration. We're going to hit space and we're going to type the word in and we're going to type space and then we're going to type the word sheets, referencing that variable on line 7. We're going to hit the right arrow once and we're going to hit space. We're going to open up a curly bracket, we're going to hit enter, we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and we're going to hit space. We're going to say conditional space logic to evaluate the sheet underscore ID input. So what's going to happen here is we're going to use an if statement to evaluate the input of our function against all of the sheet IDs. So we're going to hit enter and we're going to hit tab. We're going to use if, open parentheses, and we're going to reference sheets, square bracket I, hit the right arrow, dot, get capital S, sheet capital I, D. Open up a parentheses, hit the right arrow, then hit space, hit 2 equal signs, space, sheet underscore ID. Hit the right arrow, hit space, open up a curly bracket, hit enter, add 2 slashes for a future comment, and hit space. So again, what's happening here is we are iterating through all the values in the sheets variable. We are using the getSheetID method to then extract the sheet ID value from all of the sheets. And then we are evaluating it using the double equal signs. And we're referencing the input that we use or that we enter when we use the getSheetID method in another area of our project, which we have not done yet. So if one of the sheet IDs or multiple sheet IDs, any instance of the sheet having the ID that is equal to, meaning directly matching the input to this function, we will allow it to move on to this next step where we extract the sheet name. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we're going to declare a variable called sheet capital N name. We're going to hit space, we're going to hit equal sign, and we're going to hit space. We're going to type sheets, square bracket I, hit the right arrow, dot, get capital S, sheet capital N name, and we're going to open up parentheses. We're going to hit the right arrow, and we're going to add a semicolon. So if the sheet ID matches the sheet ID input, we will be extracting the name of the sheet. We have concluded our for loop, which means that we're going to hit the down arrow once, down arrow twice, enter once, enter twice, left arrow once, left arrow twice, and we will add 2 slashes for a comment where we say return the result of the get sheet by name function. We're going to hit enter and we're going to hit tab. And we're going to type return space wb dot get sheet, capital S sheet, capital B by capital N name. We're going to open up a parentheses and then we're going to pass in sheet capital N name from line 14. We're going to hit the right arrow and we're going to add a semicolon. So what's happened here is we are using the native getSheetByName method, which is how you access a sheet when using AppScript. Again, the issue with get sheet by name is that if the name of the sheet changes, then your script breaks. Therefore, leveraging the ID provides you with a constant that will maintain continuity of your script regardless of what the sheet name is called. We are not going to run get sheet by ID in this file. There are instances where you might get an error if you try to do that because the sheet ID is being evaluated against numbers on line 12. So if you're seeing an error, it's probably because you're hitting run within the function o1 get sheet by ID file. You're going to want to run it in another place, such as code.gs. And that's what we're going to do next to make sure that this function works correctly. Now, in order to get some logging in here, or some feedback in here, I'm going to go back to line 16. I'm going to hit enter once, enter twice, left arrow once, left arrow twice, and I'm going to add 2 slashes for a comment. I'm going to hit space, and I'm going to type logging for transparency. We're going to hit enter, and we're going to hit tab. We're going to type capital L, logger, dot log, and open up a parentheses. And we are going to log the sheet capital N name variable from line 14. So every time that this get sheet by ID function runs, it's going to tell us what sheet name it's accessing. So logger.log is a great way to add visibility into your execution log so that you can kind of see what's happening in your script. So we're going to hit save, and we're going to move on to the next portion of our code, which is collecting our sheet IDs. So we're going to declare some constants so that we can reference words instead of numbers. And after we write in those numbers, we're going to test this get sheet by ID function in our code.gs file. So we're going to navigate up to this plus sign here, and we're going to add a script file, and we're going to call it wb colon space IDs, and we're going to hit enter. We're going to clear out this boilerplate because we don't need it. We're going to add 2 slashes, and we're going to hit space, and we're just going to say sheet IDs. We're going to hit enter, and we're going to declare a constant. We're going to hit space, and we're going to say sheet capital ID capital D data space equal sign, and we're going to go back to our Google Sheet, and we're going to go to our data tab, and we are going to go to the URL, and we can see that the GID is equal to 0. Your GID might not be 0, so it's whatever comes after the equal sign and GID. So I'm going to go back to my script file, I'm going to enter in a 0, and I'm going to use a semicolon. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to declare another constant for sheet capital ID capital C condition. I'm going to hit space, I'm going to hit equal sign, I'm going to go back to my sheet, and I'm going to go to my conditions tab, and you can see that this GID is a longer number, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to my app script, and I'm going to paste in the ID, add a semicolon, hit enter, and then save. So the nice thing about this is that by having a naming convention, such as sheet ID and then a word, we can just start typing sheet ID, and then we'll see all of our sheet IDs. And then because we used a name that is easily identifiable, with our eyes, we can enter in whether we want data or condition. So this is a helpful trick as your projects expand and you might have more than 2 sheets. You can kind of just be like, give me all my sheet IDs, and then you can just have a human readable way versus having to manage numbers, which you can see are rather long. Cool, so we're going to go to our code file now, and we are going to begin developing our primary logic. So I'm on line 2. I'm going to hit enter once in order to be on line 3. I'm going to add 2 slashes for a comment. I'm going to hit space, and I'm going to say use the get sheet by ID function to access the sheet with data. So we're going to hit enter, and then we're going to hit tab. We're going to declare a variable called data, capital S, sheet. We're going to hit space, equal sign, space, and then we're going to use the get sheet by ID function, and we're going to open up our parentheses. So you can see that this takes one input, which is a sheet ID. So I'm going to begin typing sheet, capital ID, and then you can see here that we have two options, either our condition or our data. So I'm going to select my data sheet. I'm going to go to the right. I'm going to add a semicolon. I'm going to hit save. And now I'm going to hit run in order to test the get sheet by ID function, as well as to allow permissions to my spreadsheet app. So when we hit run, we are going to be prompted to review permissions and provide authorization. So we're going to select our email account. We're going to get an aggressive warning. This just says that Google hasn't verified the app. We're going to go to advanced, and then we're going to go down to go to conditional formatting, unsafe. Now again, this is strong language because Google is saying we haven't reviewed this, so you need to make sure that you know what you're providing access to. And again, it's giving you significant warnings about trust and telling you that, like, look, this permission allows the app to delete all of your work. Like every single spreadsheet that you have can be deleted. We are not going to be doing that. And allowing access like this is safe as long as you know what you are providing access to. So we're going to select allow. And you can see that our console is logging out the name data because that's the name of our sheet. So that's working wonderfully. So we are going to hit continue by hitting enter once, enter twice, left arrow once, left arrow twice, and we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and we are going to extract the values from the data sheet. We're going to hit enter, we're going to hit tab, and then we're going to declare a variable called data. We're going to hit space, equal sign, space. We're going to reference our data sheet variable from line 4. We're going to use dot get capital R range. We're going to open up a parentheses, and we are going to enter in 4 arguments to the get range method. The first argument is the row that we want to start at. So we're going to start at row 1. We're going to use a comma, and we're going to hit space. The second argument represents the column that we want to start at. We're going to start at column 1 as well. So we're going to enter a 1 in here. We're going to add a comma, and we're going to hit space, and now we are going to declare how many rows we want to go. Now, you could hard code this, but the problem with hard coding is that if your rows expand beyond the value that you enter in here, then you're going to have to come back in and change the value. So I would recommend using a dynamic method. So we're going to reference that datasheet variable on line 4, and we're going to use dot, and then we're going to say get capital L last capital R row, and then we're going to have an empty parentheses. The way that get last row works is it returns the row number or the last row number in the workbook with some type of value. So that value could be a space, it could be a number, it could be a string, it could be a float. It doesn't matter. Get last row will return the last row in the workbook that has a value. So for example, if you have 10 rows of data and row 10 is the last row with a value, the number 10 will be returned by this method. Same thing, if you have 10 rows of data and row 100 is the last row with a value, then the number 100 will be returned by this method. In the event that you need all rows in the workbook, you can use get max rows, which will give you the last row regardless of whether or not there's a value in there. In this case, we don't want blank values, so we are going to be using get last row to dynamically get the last row. We're going to move to our final argument by adding a comma and space, and this is the same thing where this is declaring the number of columns that we want to go. So we're going to use a similar method as get last row. So we're going to do datasheet dot get last column, and we're going to have an open parentheses. This works exactly the same way as get last row, where it returns the column number, the last column with a value in it. We're going to hit right arrow once, right arrow twice, and we're going to do dot get capital V values. with an open parentheses. Make sure it is values with an S and not value, because we want to extract multiple values and not one. We're going to hit the right arrow once. We're going to add a semicolon. We're going to hit enter once, enter twice, left arrow once, left arrow twice, and we're going to add another comment and hit space. Now we are going to add in, actually, you know what, my apologies. Hit delete and go back to the end of row 7. We're going to hit enter once, enter twice, and then we're going to add in a comment and a space, and we're going to do logging for transparency. We're going to hit enter, we're going to hit tab, and we're going to use logger.log. We're going to open up a parentheses, and then we're going to pass that data variable into it. We're going to hit the right arrow, and we're going to add a semicolon. The reason that we're going to do that is because I want you to see what the data variable does. So we're going to hit save on our project, and then we are going to hit run. Now you can see that we are getting feedback from the getSheetById function, which is providing us the name of the sheet that we are accessing. And then the data variable is providing us with the data that we are extracting from that tab. So you can see in our console log, we're saying data, because that's the name of the sheet that we are extracting, and then we are getting the results of the values that we've extracted. So if we go back to our sheet here, you can see in our data tab, the last line item in here is mat pushups 50, and when we go to our log, you can see the last array in our two-dimensional array is mat pushups 50. So we can confirm that we have successfully extracted the values from the data tab. We're going to resume by hitting enter once, enter twice, left arrow once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, add 2 slashes for a comment and a space. And now we're going to repeat that process and use the sheet ID function to access the sheet with conditions. We're going to hit enter once and tab, and we're going to declare a variable called condition, capital S, sheet. We're going to hit space, =, space. You can use an easier name if you want to. I want to be verbose so that it's a little bit, so it's clear what's happening here. So we are going to use getSheetById, and we're going to use an open parentheses, and then we're going to start typing sheet capital ID, and then you can see we have our sheet ID condition constant, which references the condition sheet. We're going to hit the right arrow. We're going to add a semicolon. We are going to hit save, and we're going to run again. So the results of our console log should now provide us with the name data, followed by the data values being extracted from the data tab. And now that we are accessing the condition sheet using getSheetById, the last log should say the word conditions. Perfect. So this is saying that we have successfully accessed the data tab, extracted values, successfully accessed the condition sheet, and now we are going to do the same thing where we will extract values from that sheet. So we're going to hit enter once, enter twice, left arrow once, left arrow twice, 2 slashes for a comment, space. And now we will extract the values from the conditions sheet. We're going to hit enter and tab. We're going to declare a variable called conditions. We're going to hit space, =, space. We're going to reference condition sheet dot get capital R range. We're going to open up a parentheses, and we are going to enter in number 2. Now the reason that we're entering in the number 2 is because I don't want to evaluate the header column in the condition sheet. So I'm going to go over to my condition sheet just so you can see it. We don't want to evaluate name, and we can't evaluate if amount is greater than the word amount because it's a string. So you can't use a math operation like that. So in order to avoid any potential errors, we're just going to start at row 2. So we're going to add a comma, and then we're going to enter in the value 1 because we still want to first start at that first column. We're going to add a comma, and we're going to hit space. Now this is where we need to be a little bit more dynamic from where we were in our data variable. So we're going to reference that condition sheet dot get last row with an open parentheses. However, we're going to have to modify this a little bit. Get last row returns the last row with a value. So if we go into our condition sheet, the last row in here with a value is 9. Now, when we enter 9 into the getRange method, that is saying the number of rows that we want to go. So we're starting at row 2, and then we're going to go 9 rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you can see here, we are then getting in this blank row here, which we don't want to do. Now, it doesn't really matter in this method because we are just evaluating things. So a blank row will be a blank row. But just to make sure we don't pull in values that we don't want to, we're going to hit space and we're going to use -1. That way we're modifying the get last row result of 9 and getting the number 8, which is the actual amount of rows that we want to go because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rows of values in here. So we want to start at row 2, we want to start at row 1, and then we want to go 8 rows because that's the number of results that we have. We're going to add a comma, and we're going to move on to the last argument, which is the number of columns that we want to go. So we're going to be able to use condition sheet dot get capital L last capital C column with an open parentheses. We're going to hit the right arrow once, right arrow twice. We don't have to modify this because we are starting at column 1. So the get last column number aligns with the number of columns that we have, as well as the number of columns that we want to go. We're going to use dot get capital V values again, and we're going to use an open parentheses. We're going to hit the right arrow, add a semicolon, hit enter once, enter twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and then we're going to say logging for transparency. We're going to hit enter, we're going to hit tab, we're going to use capital L logger.log, and we're going to use an open parentheses, and we're going to pass in that conditions variable that we just created. So we're going to add a semicolon. And you know what? I'm going to modify this real quick. I don't want to use the word conditions. So if you wrote conditions on line 16, let's change it to just be condition. That way the pluralization doesn't cause any errors. So again, we are going to be using the word condition on line 16 and then condition on line 19. We're going to hit save. We're going to run our file. And now you can see that we're getting data and then the data values from that tab. And then we are using the conditions tab and we are extracting the conditions from that tab. Cool, so we're going to resume on line 19, hit enter once, enter twice, left arrow once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, hit space, and we are going to begin by clearing the formatting of the data sheet. We're going to hit enter, we're going to hit tab. We're going to use data sheet again, the variable on line 4, dot get range. We're going to use an open parentheses, and we're going to enter in 4 arguments. The first argument is the row that we want to start at, which is number 1. We're going to use a comma, and we're going to use a space, and we want to start at column 1. We're going to use a comma and a space, and then we're going to reference data sheet dot get max rows, open parentheses. So get max rows returns the last row in the workbook, regardless of whether there is any value entered. And the reason that we want to do get max rows is if we remove columns from our data entry tab, we want to be able to clear the formatting from all of our columns, or sorry, from all of our rows. That allows it to be dynamic. So in the beginning of this tutorial, we showed how we could add columns and the formatting would continue. And we could remove columns and the formatting would continue so that it was confined to the data entry and not to the entire row. So by using max rows and max columns, we clear out the formatting so that we can reapply it. We're going to hit the right arrow once, add a comma, hit space, and then we're going to use data sheet again, dot get capital M max columns with an open parentheses. We're going to hit the right arrow once, right arrow twice, dot clear, capital F format. We're going to have an open parentheses. We're going to hit the right arrow and we're going to add a semicolon. Cool. So now we are going to move into the loop portion of the code base. So we're going to hit enter once, twice, left arrow once, left arrow twice, 2 slashes for a comment and a space. We are going to loop through the data values. We hit enter once, tab. We use for, open parentheses. I will represent our iterable variable. We will hit space and we will say in data. Hit the right arrow once, hit space, add curly brackets, hit enter. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment and we will say logging for transparency. We're going to hit enter and tab. We're going to use logger.log. We're going to have an open parentheses and we're going to type in data square bracket I. We're going to hit right arrow once, right arrow twice, and we're going to add a semicolon. We're going to hit save, and then we're going to hit run just so that we can see what happens in here. So you can see, I'm going to open up my console log a little bit more. The first thing that happened was we accessed the data tab using the getSheetById function on line 4. We then extracted the values in a 2-dimensional array. We accessed the conditions tab using the getSheetById function, and then we returned, or we got the values in a 2-dimensional array from that tab. We're now in our for loop where we are looping through all the data values. So you can see we are accessing each array within the 2-dimensional array, which represents each row of data that we have. This is the first step in us being able to evaluate these values in order to see what they say. So we're going to have to do the same thing for the conditions tab. So we're going to resume on line 27. We're going to hit enter once, enter twice. Actually, you know what? Let's not do that. We're going to go back to line 27. We're going to hit enter once, left arrow once, left arrow twice, and we're going to add another comment for loop through the conditions values. So we're going to hit enter and tab. I'm going to scroll down a little bit just so that we have a little bit more room. And then we're going to use for parenthesis, and we're going to use the letter J as our iterable variable. We don't want to reuse I because the length of the data 2-dimensional array and the length of the condition 2-dimensional array are different. So we need to have unique for loops for each 2-dimensional array. Therefore, we need to have a different variable that represents our iteration through the array. In this case, J will be used space in space condition. We're going to go to the right. We're going to hit space. We're going to add a curly bracket. We're going to hit enter. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment with a space. We're going to use capital L. Oh, so we'll say logging for transparency. We're going to hit enter and tab. We are going to say capital L logger.log open parentheses, and then we're going to say condition square bracket J. Right arrow once, right arrow twice, add a semicolon. We're going to hit save. We're going to run our project again. So you can see what's happening now is we have a longer list of values that we've iterated through. And that's because we are iterating through 2 different things. So basically our for loop will happen for our data, and our for loop will happen for our condition. And you know what? I'm going to make this a little bit easier to see, hopefully. I'm going to add a space and a plus sign to line 27 with a space, and I'm going to add single quotes and a space. I'm going to say this is data, and then I'm going to go down to line 31, and next to condition J, I'm going to hit space, plus sign, space, single quote, space, this is condition. And I'm going to run my script again. And you can see what's happening here is that we are getting a data loop, and then you can see that we're looping through all of the conditions. And then we're getting a data loop, and then we're getting all of the conditions. We're getting a data loop, and then we're getting all the conditions. So this is establishing a way for us to evaluate the data entry against all of the values that exist in the conditions. So we are going to resume on line 27, and we're going to hit enter once, left arrow once, left arrow twice. And now we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, conditional statement to evaluate the data against the condition. We're going to hit enter and tab. So we're going to use an if statement, and we're going to say if data square bracket I. We're going to go to the right, and we're going to add another square bracket, and we're going to enter in 0, right arrow, space, double equal sign, space, condition, square bracket, J, right arrow, square bracket, 0. So we're saying here, if the first point in the data array is equal to the first point in the condition array, then move on to the next process. So I'll open up my execution log so you can see that. What's happening in here is we are evaluating this array against this array, right? So we're saying data, iterator variable, 0. Arrays are 0 indexed. So the first index point in an array is 0. So when we say data I0, we are saying array point 1 compared to array point 1, right? 0 equals first. So in this scenario, name would be evaluated against Matt, Mark, Christy, Hallie. None of those conditions are met. Therefore, this would not be allowed to move on to the next step within our conditional statement of the if. The next data point that is logging through is the name Matt. The first condition is Matt, therefore the condition is met, it would move on. The next condition is Matt, the condition is met, therefore it moves on. The next is Mark, it would not be met, so on and so forth. So when we are saying data I0, condition J0, we're saying compare the first array point against the first array point. We want more conditions than that, so we're going to use a space and an ampersand and a space. So this ampersand allows us to say and. So if the first array point are equal, we are also going to say data square bracket I, right arrow, square bracket 1, right arrow, space, 2 equal signs, space, condition, square bracket J, right arrow, square bracket 1. So now we're saying if array point 1 is equal to condition array point 1 and data array point 2 is equal to condition array point 2, move on to the next portion of the code. So I'm going to open up my execution log again and use that same example. We already know that name and exercise does not exist in our condition array. However, the name Matt does. So that means that these two conditions will meet the first criteria of array point 1 being a name. When we move on to the second array point, aka number 1, we are now evaluating the exercise. So array point 1 here, aka the second point in the array, says push-ups. So because that matches this point here, this continues on through the process. This condition says pull-ups, therefore it does not meet the second condition and therefore would not be included. So now that we have established two conditions, we need to add our final condition, which is the amount. So we're going to go back to our if statement and we're going to go to the right of condition square bracket j square bracket 1. We're going to hit space and we're going to use another ampersand. We're going to hit space and we're going to type the word data square bracket I, right arrow, square bracket 2, which means the second index point in the array, also known as the third value in the array. So this is the amount of push-ups that have been entered into the data tab. So we are going to go to the right of the square bracket 2. We're going to hit space. We're going to use a greater than sign, equal sign, space. Condition, square bracket j, right arrow, square bracket 2. So what's being said here is if the name and the exercise match and the amount is greater than or equal to the amount, move on to the next step in the process. So what that looks like from our log, right? We're going to go back to this example one more time. This is the data that has been entered. The name is Matt, the exercise is push-ups, and the amount is 30. The first portion of our if statement is saying if index point 0, aka the first data point, is equal to the first data point, move forward. We've met that condition. Data square bracket I square bracket 1 matches the exercise to the condition exercise, it moves on. And then if this amount is greater than this amount, we move forward, right? So that's what we have established with this if logic here. This is a little bit long, so if you are having trouble with this, reach out in the comments or hit me up in an email and I'll gladly review your code. It's best for you to either send me your file via email or to have a comment that I can read. One note about comments, sometimes YouTube hides them because of the computer coding in them, so if I am slow to respond, I apologize. We're going to resume on line 33 by hitting space and opening up a curly bracket. This is where we are going to be adding some logging for transparency and then applying our formatting. We're nearing the end of this tutorial, so fantastic if you're still hanging around. We're going to hit enter and we are going to add 2 slashes for a comment and we will say logging for transparency. We're going to hit enter and tab. So we're going to use logger.log and we're going to open a parentheses and we're going to use single quotes. And we will say this is the row that met the condition. We're going to add a semicolon and a space. We're going to hit the right arrow once and space, and we're going to use a plus sign, space, I. We're going to go to the right, and we're going to add a semicolon. We're going to hit enter. We're going to say logger.log, open parentheses, single quote. This is the data that met the conditions, or the condition. We're going to add a semicolon, or colon, space, right arrow, space, plus sign, space, data, square bracket, I. We're going to hit the right arrow once, right arrow twice, add a semicolon, hit enter. We're going to do logger.log, open parentheses, single quote. This is the condition that was met. I'm going to add a colon with a space, right arrow, space, plus sign, space, condition, square bracket, J. Right arrow once, right arrow twice, add a semicolon. Hit enter, logger.log, one last time, open parentheses, single quote, star, space, star, space, star. Right arrow once, right arrow twice, add a semicolon. So the reason that I added this logging in here was so that you had a way to see what the logging output is so that you can detect bugs while you're establishing your logic. So we're going to save our project and we're going to hit run. Now we're getting a lot of feedback in here because of the loops that we have in place. So you can see that we are getting that this is the row that met the condition, and then the values that popped up. But we have a lot of other stuff going on in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back in here, and we're going to go to line 31, and we're going to add we're going to go to line 27, and we're going to add 2 slashes on line 27 to comment out the data feedback. And then we're going to go to line 31, and we're going to add 2 slashes and a space to add the conditions that were met. That way, this will be a little bit cleaner. So I'm going to hit run again. And you can see now that we're getting feedback about all of the rows that met conditions. Now, the reason that I added in this number here is because we need to dynamically reference the value that, or the line that needs formatting on it. So this is a little bit complicated. It's not complicated, but it might not be abundantly clear if you haven't done this before. So again, the challenge again with arrays is that they are 0 indexed. And that means that 1 is 0, 2 is 1. So in this case, the row that met the condition is row number 1, and the data that met the condition was Matt push-ups 30. If we go back to our spreadsheet, you can see that Matt push-up, or sorry, in our data tab, you can see Matt push-ups 30 is on row 2, but the array point is 1 because it's in a 0 index. So it is the second thing, but because of the discrepancy between the way that the spreadsheet graphical user interface structures indexing compared to how the app script structures indexing, we will have to normalize this value. Otherwise, this would result in the first row being conditionally formatted instead of the second row. So we're going to move on to that normalization process by resuming on line 38. So we're going to hit enter once, and we're going to hit left arrow once, twice, add 2 slashes for a comment with a space. And we're going to say if the conditions are met, then add formatting to the data sheet. We're going to hit enter, we're going to hit tab. So we're going to reference our data sheet one last time, and we're going to use dot get capital R range open parentheses. We're going to establish the 4 arguments that we want to enter. And the first thing that we're going to do is type capital N number and have an open parentheses, and then we're going to pass in I. The reason that we need to do this is that I is returned as a string. So if we try to do math functions on it, then it will concatenate rather than add. So by converting I to a number, we then have the opportunity to run math functions on it. So the way that we're going to normalize this this number here, so that the graphical user interface, also known as a GUI, has similar indexing as AppScript, or in this case, we're normalizing AppScript to the GUI. We're going to use number around our iterator. We're going to hit space, and we're going to use the plus symbol, and then we're going to add 1 to it. So the same way that we removed 1 from get last row is the same that we're going to add 1 to our index. And I don't think I explicitly stated this, but just to make sure it's clear, the for loop also runs in a 0 index unless if you declare your variable as a different starting point. So for loops will always run 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, unless you establish the variable as something else. So now we've identified our start row dynamically based upon the data point that met the condition. So in here, where we have this, this is the row that met the condition. You'll see that we are dynamically returning values in here based upon what conditions are met. So that's this I variable here. And then we're adding 1 to it in order to get the row that that data point is coming from. We're going to add a comma and a space. Our starting column is 1, comma. We only want to go one row because we are going to address one row at a time. We're going to add a comma, and then we're going to do data, square bracket 0, right arrow dot length. This evaluates the length of the data array, which is how we evaluate the number of columns that we need to apply formatting to. We're going to go to the right, and we are going to add a dot set, capital B, background, and we're going to open up a parentheses. This is where you can enter in the color that you want using, I forget what it's called. It has a technical name that I'm blanking on now, but basically like this value here is a, I can't believe I'm forgetting what it is now. But you can find various coloring by going up in this fill color here and then selecting custom. And then, oh, it's a hex code, right? So you can see here that like white is all Fs. And then if you scroll around, you'll see that you're getting this hex code that changes. So you can dynamically like pick what color you want going in here. So I'm going to just roll with what I did in my last script. So we're going to add single quotes because it needs to be a string. We're going to use a hash symbol, and we're going to do 6AA84F. We're going to go back to this dot here. We're going to hit enter. We're going to go to the right of our parentheses, and we're going to add another dot, and we're going to set font color, and we're going to use an open parentheses, and we're just going to do white. So we're going to do single quote hash 6 Fs. So F, 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 F. We're going to go back to that dot set font color. We're going to hit enter. We're going to go to the right of set font color, dot set capital F font, capital W weight. We're going to open up a parentheses, and then we are going to do single quotes bold. Right arrow once, right arrow twice, add a semicolon. We're going to go to the right of dot set font weight, and we're going to hit enter. This way it's just kind of more tightly together. We're going to hit save, and hopefully we're done. So we are going to go back to our sheet here, and you can see that we have no formatting. We are going to go to our script, and we are going to hit run. We are getting some feedback about our system so that we can kind of see what's been happening here. Our logic is sound. Let's go back to our sheet to see if it worked the way that we wanted it to. And it's perfect, right? So we got Matt push-ups 30. His condition was 25. That was met. Mark push-ups 17. We go to his conditions. You can see it was 15, so he's over that. Great. Hallie had 10 push-ups and 10 pull-ups. Hallie had 10 push-ups and 5 pull-ups. So this is an instance where greater than or equal to was met. And then finally, Matt had 50 push-ups, which is greater than 25. Wonderful. So one last thing that we're going to do in here is we are going to go to triggers. We are going to create a new trigger. We are going to use our function, our main function there called my function. We're going to go to select event type, and we're going to change it from on open to on edit. We are going to save it. Cool, it's in there. So now let's test it out to make sure it works. So we're going to go to conditions, and we're going to change 25 to 45. We're going to hit enter. We're going to go to our data tab, and we can see that we have automatically changed our conditional formatting in here. I'm going to add another column in here just to make sure that that works. You can see it has expanded. I'm going to add a column in here called phone number, and we should continue that expansion. And then we're going to delete email. We're good to go. Cool. So I hope you found this helpful. You know, this is something that hopefully you can apply to your work and other projects. Um, this conditional if in here is really where you can modify things based upon what your column layout is. So, it doesn't matter if the layout of your tables are not, the same way as this, where the name column is in the same place on both of these. You can have these be dynamic so that this is column 1 and this is column 3 and this is column 2 and this is column 4, so on and so forth. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below the video. If you're into this type of stuff, my channel is full of it. So if you enjoyed this, hopefully you'll check out another one.